Hey there, hope everyone is having a great day. My name is James Lee. Welcome to 5149, a channel where I talk business and politics from an independent perspective. Today we're going to be discussing California Proposition 22, which is a ballot initiative which aims to preserve the independent contractor status of gig workers in California and has huge implications for the tens of thousands of Uber, Lyft, Doordash drivers, and the like. Specifically, I'm going to talk about what is Prop 22 and why it's important, the big money interests that are backing the initiative, and some of the shady things that I've seen happening behind the scenes. And finally, end with how this relates to a really important discussion on how people in power, it could be companies, it could be political leaders, but how they constantly frame issues in a misleading way to present a false narrative to people in an attempt to get them to act against their own best interests. A quick favor before we get going: if you end up enjoying this video, please take a second to give it a quick like and share with a friend. Also, subscribe if you haven't already done so to support independent media. Okay, so what is California Proposition 22? So in 2019, California passed a piece of legislation called Assembly Bill 5, which created the presumption that a worker is an employee rather than an independent contractor, unless the hiring business can prove each part of this ABC test they created. Part A, which I'm going to focus on, states that the person is free from control or direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. Well, it just so happens that ride-sharing apps like Uber and Lyft will deactivate a driver due to low ratings, which would directly conflict with Part A of the ABC test. That means that in California, Uber and Lyft drivers, as well as delivery workers for companies like Instacart and Doordash, would legally become employees. Now, this would mess up the business model for these gig-based tech companies, because now they're going to have to provide things like health insurance, social security benefits, paid sick leave, and other things like that employees are entitled to versus just being an independent contractor. So in comes Proposition 22 on the ballot this November, which would consider app-based drivers to be independent contractors and not employees or agents. Essentially, it would exempt app-based companies from Assembly Bill 5. And to be fair, on the other end, the proposition would provide gig workers with certain additional benefits like a guaranteed wage, healthcare subsidies, and some additional occupation accident insurance. Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi said that what Prop 22 is all about is starting to move into the best of two worlds. You got flexibility, you're your own boss, you're your own CEO, but you do have protections. Now that sounds really nice, but before I take his word at face value, let's first follow the money and take a look at some of the sketchy things that are going on behind the scenes. So in terms of campaign spending, Proposition 22 is California's most expensive ballot measure in history, with over $190 million in total funding. That's an insane amount of money, which indicates that some corporations have a lot to lose. Uber and Lyft have already threatened to leave California, citing their inability to switch their business model. So instead, they're pouring millions to fund Prop 22. Of the over $180 million raised in support of Prop 22, Lyft has contributed $48.3 million, Uber $47.9 million, DoorDash $47.7, Instacart $27.5, and Postmates $10 million. When corporations are giving massive campaign contributions like that, alarm bells should go off in your head. I mean, I don't even have to look into the details to know that there's something fishy going on here with this ballot initiative if there's that much direct contribution and from all of those players. And also, look how lopsided the support versus opposed fundraising is. Over $180 million for yes on 22 and only $4.6 million for the opposition. Like, the ride sharing and delivery giants are outspending their opposition 30-1 or even more. I mean, if the ballot measure really does what the Uber CEO is saying it does, which is to provide flexibility and protections, they probably shouldn't need to do that, right? And in addition to the corrupting influence of big money, there's also some disturbing instances of harassment of critics of Prop 22. The Los Angeles Times reported that Veela Dubal, an associate professor at UC Hastings School of Law, an outspoken supporter of AB 5 and a critic of Prop 22, she has become the target of harassment on Twitter, some of it obscene and some of it overtly encouraged by the Yes on Proposition 22 campaign, which is heavily funded by Uber and Lyft. Her home address has also even been published online, which is prompting her local police to have to start doing regular patrols around her home. I mean, this is legit terrifying. Like I said, if this proposition was really intended to help gig workers, why would they need to spend millions of dollars intimidating and silencing critics? Well, to answer that question, the most likely truth is that the proposition benefits the tech companies way more than it benefits the workers, which leads me to my final point, which is that The people in power always try to frame the discussion in a misleading way and present a false dichotomy that isn't really reflective of reality. In this case, they present two discrete choices: freedom or lack thereof. Just take a look at this Yes on 22 ad that highlights the government is taking away the freedom to be an independent contractor.
Unemployment has skyrocketed. What do state politicians do? Pass a drastic law that could eliminate hundreds of thousands of jobs by making it illegal for app-based drivers to continue working as independent contractors, threatening to shut down rideshare and food delivery services, hurting drivers and customers at the worst possible time. Proposition 22 will protect drivers' ability to work as independent contractors, saving critical jobs and services. Learn more.
You see what they're doing here. It's either you have freedom and you let the free market reign, or you can let people starve and die. Nothing in between. Now, I did a story a few weeks ago highlighting how companies like Uber and Lyft are basically capitalist shams, which I'll link at the end of this video. But what they leave out here is the story that there is definitely a reasonable alternative, something in between, but it's just not convenient for their business model. I mean, if we were to have a reasonable conversation about Prop 22 and AB 5, I would say that it's probably too restrictive. I would say that there's a lot of workers who really want that flexibility and don't want to be employees. But there's also a large percentage of folks who rely on full-time gig work to make a living. According to Uber, that split is about 80-20, 80% part-time, 20% full-time. So for some of these workers, Prop 22 makes a lot of sense. They can have that flexibility they want and enjoy some additional benefits like a health insurance subsidy. But for those who work full-time, there needs to be another classification that allows them to collect all the benefits and protections that a full-time employee should have under the law. That would be the reasonable thing to do. But instead they distort the discussion into this black and white argument about how the government is, just trying to crush people's rights and take away freedoms, take away jobs, destroy the economy. It's very similar to the conversation around the reopening of the economy during the pandemic. They present two choices. It's like either we stay sheltered and have the economy collapse and have mass unemployment, or we can sacrifice public health and open up and get people back to work. But in reality, there is another way. Like, we can institute a payroll protection program that many countries in Europe have done and protect people's health and their economic stability. So in terms of Prop 22, the reality is that this is an initiative that is written for app companies with tons and tons of money behind it. That's something to be wary of, because we can't be having corporations writing legislation. No matter what the CEOs are publicly spinning, we know that corporations in general are going to gouge as much out of their workforce as possible. And in a society that values humanity, we need to have laws and regulations in place to protect workers from being exploited. So to wrap it up, Prop 22 at best is not nearly nuanced enough to solve the issues that it's supposedly trying to correct. And at worst, it is an example of how the wealthy and the powerful oftentimes frame issues to maximize their ability to maintain the status quo, to pit the working class against each other, and to manipulate them into fighting against their own best interests. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll link a few additional resources about Prop 22 in case people want to read more into it. Please let me know what you think. Also, take a moment to hit that like button, share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already done so we can take back our media. My name is James Lee, and I'll be back next week with more, and as always, thank you for your time.